Knock at the Cabin. So this is the latest sci-fi horror from famed slash notorious director M. Night Shyamalan, who we know for such hits as The Sixth Sense, Signs, Unbreakable, and such kind of mediocre films as The Last Airbender, just a whole lot of stuff. Shyamalan's real hit and miss, but we always got to give him a chance because you never know. He has knocked it out of the park a couple of times, and so I was giving him a chance. Maybe he will again. His previous film was Old, which came out a couple of years ago. It involved these group of tourists who go to this beach that makes them old, makes them age fast. That was a little bit lackluster, but we're here at Knock at the Cabin. This is a small film, definitely written during the pandemic. It all kind of takes place at this cabin. It stars Jonathan Groff and Ben Aldridge as a same-sex family. They have an adopted daughter called Wen, played by Kristen Cui.
Yes.
They are out at their cabin when kind of one day, out of the woods, seemingly out of nowhere, enormous Dave Bautista comes out of the woods. His name's Leonard. He approaches the adopted daughter when they have this nice little conversation, and it's hugely intimidating because he's such a huge guy. He's this big mass of a man, and he strikes up a friendly conversation and says, I need to. Where are your parents? Where are you staying? We need to find them. To make this a little bit shorter, eventually. Leonard, Dave Bautista, and his three acolytes break into this cabin, tie up this family, and they give them the proposal. They say, the world is ending, the apocalypse is about to happen, and only you can stop it by selecting someone in your family to die, and you must also kill them. This is a similar premise to Killing of a Sacred Deer, which we reviewed forever ago. That's kind of our sci-fi setup. And so our question is, are these people insane? Are they part of a cult? Are they crazy? Or is there something more? Will they have to make this kind of terrible decision? So that's our setup. Zach, what'd you think?
So this movie's in a unique space for Andy and I because we haven't talked about it at all. I wasn't even sure if Andy had seen it before we got on the podcast, so I'm glad you did. I saw it too. Normally we get together and talk about stuff like this, and for Old, we talked about it a lot, I think, before the show because we were excited to be like, oh my God. I mean, we saw it together. And Old, I think, makes the painful, very, very painful crime of waiting way too long to tell the characters on screen what the audience already knows, that the beach makes you old. It's like nearly an hour before the characters in the movie figure out the beach makes you old. It's brutal, horrible pacing. It's completely thrown off. I don't know if M. Night Shyamalan listens to feedback. He probably does a little bit, because this movie does not do that. It very quickly moves into exactly where it needs to be and spends most of its time there. A small cast, small setting. At times, it almost felt Hitchcockian. Maybe not as good as Hitchcock, but I think Knock at the Cabin does some things well. It's not Shyamalan's best movie. I think it's stronger than Old for sure. So I'm pleased to say I liked it more. Andy, what did you think?
I feel like it still took too long to get to the premise because we basically where we are, you could start where Act 2 starts because again, we know from the trailer there is these four scary people. They have, Big Dave is Big Dave, but they also have these big manufactured weapons that look very medieval. We know they break into the house. We know the premises. Then you must choose someone in your family to kill in order to end the apocalypse. So we spend the first 40 minutes getting there, and there's a long sequence of them breaking into the cabin, which just goes on too long because we know they're going to get in. So we just get us there, and then kind of the middle of the film, we are spent like trying to convince them that no, this is real. And there's like news reports that start coming on, and they talk about having had visions, and they were brought together from four very disparate places. Trying not to get too much into the details. There are some things that work about this and a lot that doesn't. It does the same kind of like Old, where it's really like a Twilight Zone episode or like a Black Mirror episode that's stretched into an hour and a half or an hour and 40 minutes. Like it's it's a small. The premise is a little bit too small and simple, and the film is too small. It could have expanded on things, but again, this is definitely a pandemic written film, and everything was very small in scale for a reason.
So it does have, I should say, a good runtime. It's like 100 minutes. It's like real tight, which is great. I think Old was like almost 2 hours. Yeah, at least it felt like it. So it does a better job of moving, I think, in that way. But I think the novel that this movie is based on. I forget the name of it. The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay is the name of it. And I think that serves as like a much stronger base for Shyamalan to kind of shape into his own vision and adapt than what originally I think was the graphic novel for Old. I think Old was a little thin, and I think Shyamalan had it in his head that it was a bit like, I don't know, a bit more divine than it turns out to be, when actually it's a really simple idea. Knock at the Cabin, alternatively, like I think it comes off initially as very simple and grows into something a bit bigger. And I like that. Like, I think it's still got problems in pacing for sure. Andy's right. It does still take a little while to get to what's in the trailer, but it's much faster. Like, you can at least agree, like, if it had been Old, it would have been like they're getting home from work on Monday, and one of the husbands is like, God, I'm so stressed. And Eric's like, well, it'll be okay. Well, we'll just got to make it to Friday. And then, like, Tuesday, like, it would have been forever before they're in the car going to the cabin and they're doing the thing. This one opens, they're already there. And they've already been at the cabin. Like, at least it's like, okay, we're in the setting we need to be. And he's right. It does feel like a bit of a bottle picture that way, especially in some of its presentations of events happening outside of the cabin. Like Andy said, they are trying to prevent the apocalypse. You can see a little bit in the trailer, these like news reports they'll pull up. They'll show something happening. And it's like pretty clunky footage of like a tsunami. It looks okay in the moment, I think, but does come off looking a little cheesy. I think it does a good job with its material because of the book, and because of, I should say, Shyamalan's camera work, which I like a lot, and also a few performances, which we should mention.
Yeah, I was going to say this does continue the M. Night Shyamalan tradition of ruining books, because Old is also based on a book that's very different, and apparently this Knock at the Cabin, the book that it's based on, is also very different from here. So M. Night, just like when he makes these adaptations, he makes a lot of changes, not necessarily for the better. But the performances are really good, and I think the directing and cinematography is really good. These are the things that work in the film. We have 4 people who genuinely believe that they are in the apocalypse, that this is the end of the world, and also part of what they have to do is kind of begin sacrificing one another in order to kind of both unleash a plague, but try to convince the family that you got to pick one of you to perish. And so the performances are top notch. It's one of the things that does work really well in the film.
Yes, Big Dave is a lot of fun as Leonard. Like, he's very subtle, he's very drawn back. He's got it's testament to, I think, his acting ability. Dave Bautista is so good at feeling soft, even though he looks like this just monster of a man. Like, in this movie, he just feels like the most innocent dude. Like, he's never super aggressive. Like, he keeps himself really toned back, and like you get a feeling uniquely that like Leonard is not a dangerous man, which is perfect for his stature, because he looks like a dangerous guy. And you spend a lot of the film pondering, what exactly is happening here. Are these events being influenced by the apocalypse or some kind of larger meaning? Or is it less than that? Is it maybe not all as it seems? And Shyamalan, of course, is known for his twists. And I think it's worth mentioning that, like, one of the things that Shyamalan, I think, I feel like with this movie, maybe I'm overreading this. He's coming into his own here. I think he's starting to tap into this idea of like belief as a subject. Like, what do you believe? What have you been told versus what have you seen? And this happens in a lot of his movies. I mean, a lot of his movies handle like what is real and what isn't real, and how does that influence me and my identity and my decision making. Signs does this. The Village does this. Split does this. Glass does this. Like a lot of them. Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, all of them kind of tackle this idea. And Knock at the Cabin, I think, unlike Old, like, is much more in line with that mantra. Are the ththings that are happening to us real, or is this false? Do the people who are doing this to us think it's real, or do they think it's false? Like, how does this all shake out into a larger situation? And it does a really great job of walking that line, because Eric, one of the fathers, is skeptical. Or no, he's not so skeptical. He kind of sort of believes what's happening. But Andrew, the other father, does not. And he's like, no, this is not real. This is all fake. And he will list reasons why. And it's just enough of a seed of doubt. It's just enough for me to kind of set up in my chair a little and go, okay, hold on a second. Maybe this is going somewhere. And I like that it doesn't overstay its welcome. I like that it's not too long. I think that stuff is where it's most effective.
Right. Well, part of the again with the performances, one of the things that ties in, there's a B story, kind of the subplot is the meeting of the family. We have a young Eric and Andrew meeting, but also Andrew at one point suffers this kind of vicious attack, which is kind of assumed to be kind of a homophobic bit of violence and an attack, and that's part of what he thinks is happening here. He said, we're being attacked and targeted as a same-sex couple. There's no apocalypse, and that's part of it. It's very clumsily tied in, but that is kind of his motivation of like really wanting to fight back, because the last thing he wants to be is a victim.
Yeah, and I think that plays effectively against our group of hostage takers, I guess, because when one of them is accused of a larger crime and then subsequent evidence comes out that points to, okay, that might be true, suddenly like motivations are up in the air. And I love that. Like, I love this moment where this movie pulls back and goes, wait a second. Yeah. Okay, we're seeing stuff on TV, but is that actually linked to what's happening here? Is that even real? Is that pre-recorded? How much of that is valid? And like, you get this clever bit of like paranoia in the movie. Unfortunately, being a quick film, it doesn't manage to sit in that space long enough. There's a lot of films that can do this well. There's a lot of directors who seem to be able to knock this out. But this one's not quite there, because when you really start to feel like you're unsure of what's happening, suddenly we slide into the third act and they just explain it all right on the front. And it's still a little up in the air. I guess it can be left up to interpretation a bit, but you are ultimately spoon-fed an ending. And I think that hurts it. Like, I definitely think that puts kind of a damper on what could have been a larger, more expressive idea.
Right. Part of what makes this so small, or too small, in my opinion, is there's a lot of telling and not showing. These four acolytes, these four people that are have witnessed. They are here because they have had visions of the apocalypse. They have seen it in their mind, and they have seen each other, and they have like come from different parts of the country and come together. But the thing is, they tell you all this through dialogue, and I was like, it would be really neat to see that, to see these people having visions, to see how they come together to again just show more than tell. That's what the language of cinema is, and we have way too much talking and way too much dialogue about it. And that's why I think this is it's kind of a victim of being written and made during the pandemic. Is they kept everything very small for logistical reasons and not having to do. But I think that would have made a lot more. It would have just made everything more interesting.
It's funny. I went a bit of the opposite way, because I totally get where you're coming from. But I thought part of them telling people's past and not showing it was effective because it leaves your characters to wonder whether or not they do or do not believe it. If you showed me a flashback, I'd be much more prone to think, oh, that's truth. And that's what I've seen. If you showed me a vision of these things, I would believe it. But if you just tell me your past, it's completely up to me to decide whether or not you meant that. Like, because I don't have any actual tangible evidence of reality. And like, I like that this movie plays in that space. I think it, when you say it like that, they just tell you, don't show you. Okay, that's true. You're right. And movies are show, don't tell. That's very true. But in the moment, in the picture, that didn't bug me too much, because I like that feeling of like who's telling the truth and who isn't it, right? It's like three truths and a lie. The movie, like you're kind of left to wonder who's being honest here and who isn't. What are they being honest about? What are their real motivations? What are their real intentions? I like that our two dad characters kind of start to splinter I think that's kind of a neat part of their relationship. Obviously, they still stick together, but one starts to kind of be like, okay, hold on a second, maybe they're onto something here, and the other one's like, not at all. There's no way. And I like that kind of little internal struggle of the two of them. I love the girl, Kristen Cui is her name. She's going on to do stuff for sure. She's really charming. Somebody pointed out Shyamalan's pretty good at directing kids. He's not perfect, but he's not bad. Like there's some decent kid performances across Shyamalan pictures, and I think this is another one of like a pretty good example. And I also want to mention Ben Aldridge as Andrew, really tremendous, and
Yeah.
Abby Quinn is Adrian. She's one of the four girls. We've actually seen her in a couple features we watched in the show. She's an extra in I'm Thinking of Ending Things. She's in like one other thing we watched, but she's I think actually really interesting in here. Like really stands out as kind of this mousy girl who is involved in this terrible situation. Any other thoughts, Andy? I want to talk real quick about visuals and music, but I should duck back.
Yeah. So one of the things, again, a lot of our evidence of whether the apocalypse is happening are these big news. There's a TV in the cabin that happens to have good cable, even though they don't have good signal. And they're getting all these news reports of things, and it's kind of a cop out. Again, it would be with kind of lackluster CGI. You could have been more creative about that, but also it's almost too big. Like it would be better if like instead of a world-ending event, it was more like this nearby city will be destroyed if you, or the country, or just something. It's a little bit too big. It's blue sky beam, like you get in a lot of like superhero movies, like gonna destroy the earth. I think this is the part where it needed to be scaled down to something a little bit more tangible and real.
It's true. What was that? There's a cabin horror film where it's like body horror. These people, I forget the name of it. People get infected, and like one by one, they
Cabin
start to.
Fever.
I think Cabin Fever does that a lot better. Like it's a lot slower and everything's immediate. It's happening to the characters. Like so, you kind of have that back and forth. Whereas this is mostly stuff happening outside of the cabin. Yeah, and you mostly get it through like newsreel footage. There is like one shot in the trailer that I thought looked cool that I don't think is actually in the movie, or if it is, it's shopped. It's and Andrew's got Wen, and they're exiting the cabin. They're outside, and the camera's down on the ground, looking way up, and you can see them walking, and then above them, like an airplane spinning out of control in the air. And I thought, okay, that looks really cool. That's like immediate, intangible. And I don't think that actually makes it into the feature, or if it is, it's like it's changed. But I do wish they'd had a bit more of that. Yeah, because on the one hand, you play into this feeling of like, well, what do you believe? Do you believe this is happening or don't you? But at the same time, it can make for a bit of a dry picture, especially if you've got high expectations. One thing I didn't think was dry was a lot of the camera work I actually really liked. It's not perfect, but a lot of really interesting one-point perspective, a lot of like genuinely thoughtful framing that I did not expect. I mean, I know Shyamalan's been doing this a long time, but like I don't recall like any of that from old. But there's a couple scenes in here where I was like, actually, that's a really great shot, or that looks really good. I don't know if he worked with a new cinematographer, but and then additionally, I like the music. I like the music of this movie a lot. Like lots of strings, very active, keeps suspense moving, very orchestral. Like I don't know. I thought it felt tight. And any thoughts? You are a resident music man.
I can't really remember much of the music. Didn't really stand out to me.
Well, I can't hum any of it, so I get. I get
what sing the theme to Knock the Cabin.
Yeah, go ahead, hum the theme. Yeah.
The last thing I want to touch on is that it kind of thematically is all over the place. Again, there's a limit to the number of conflicts we can create in fiction, but what a movie or a piece of fiction can be about, it's kind of subtext and themes can be kind of infinite. But we get a big mix of stuff, and it doesn't really all tie together. We kind of have themes of like past trauma, PTSD, like kind of this blind faith, but it's real disparate and doesn't really tie together super well.
Yeah, I'm Not quite in the same boat. I think I liked it a little bit more than Andy, but like I should say I don't think it's Shyamalan's. It's
not his
not
worst.
quite like a return to form, right? But it's not like a return to form. It's not like, oh my god. Like I told Andy before this came out, I saw two different headlines on Twitter. One was like, it's his best since Signs. It's the best features, which like we've heard that for his last 4 movies. But secondly, other people they were like, another miss. You know, whoosh, like totally terrible. So I like most of Shyamalan's features, I feel comfortable at least saying that you're probably going to land in one of those spaces. But before you go see it, we should tell you, Andy, would you recommend Knock at the Cabin?
I would say save it for streaming. There are some great things about it. We have good performances led by Dave Bautista as Leonard, who's such a big guy. Just looked him up. He's 6'4", nearly 300 pounds. Massive. But great cast all around. Some interesting moments. Good direction. I think that's probably where Shyamalan shines the best is through a director. He needs to get someone else's script. He needs to stop writing.
His dialogue's terrible.
Yeah.
It's bad.
But it's a little slow in the pacing. It's a lot of telling and not showing. It feels a little bit like a play sometimes. It's okay. It's definitely better than old. Not as good as what he's done before. Save it for streaming.
I'm kind of in the same camp. I no big rush to go see this in a movie theater. If you're gonna catch Discount Tuesday or something, like maybe, but like you're not beating down the door to see this thing. I think streaming is a fine place for it. If anything, it'll probably play better because of streaming offerings. I do think it's pretty good. Like, and if Andy's right, and this is like a full-on pandemic feature, like I think it's one of the better. Like we've seen some that are kind of really lukewarm or kind of experimental, but this one seems to be in a pretty good place. It's different and it's based on a book. Might be worth going to read that if you're interested instead. But I think Knock at the Cabin's good. I know it's not great Shyamalan, but it's good Shyamalan.
Like it's worth it's worth like a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah,
sip lemonade and watch.
Yes, I would tell. Yeah, if my dad needed a feature to watch, and he's like, "Oh yeah," I'm like, "Knock at the Cabin's not bad." Like he probably like that, like a couple hours. Sure, it's not bad. Short, quick, to the point, nearing that ideal 90-minute film length. Knock at the Cabin's not that bad.